Okay, all set.
Okay, hi, everybody. Welcome for coming today. Thank you on this very nice day in New York. I don't know, there are people from all over, so we have nice weather today, although it's probably turning on Thursday. So my name is Carol Stern, and I'm a librarian at the GLEN COVE Public Library. Before we begin, I just want to tell you to sign up and mark your calendars for the next month's author, Dan Grunfeld. It's a nonfiction book, a little different than what we usually do. It's called By the Grace of the Game. It's a story about the author's love for his family, his heritage told with warmth and gratitude. It was a really wonderful book. He'll be with us on Tuesday, June 21st at 2 o'clock. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
It's really great that you're here with us today. I love the book. We were talking also, but I love the book. So Jessica was born in Boston and raised in Southern California. Her novels have been featured on the Today Show, CNN, NPR, and in Cosmo, Vanity Fair, Bust, Time Out, Parade, Oprah Summer Reads, and other national publications. She has short stories and essays, and they have been published in numerous magazines, journals, and anthologies. She co-wrote the script for Love on the Run, starring Frances Fisher and Steve Howey. She has taught writing at Johns Hopkins University and the Fashion Institute of Technology. Currently, she lives in New York. So if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat. And at the end of the discussion, we can open it up to the audience if you would like to talk instead of putting it in the chat. So Mary Jane is an unforgettable, delightful novel. It's full of humor, sharpness, and so much more, in my opinion. So how did you come to write Mary Jane?
Well, yeah, I mean, so first of all, the idea came to me. I was at a party in New York, and I met this woman who told me she had been a summer nanny in the middle of the 70s for a psychiatrist in a Northeast town, and that a very famous rock star and movie star came, and he was getting sober, and that he was hidden in the third floor of this house in this Northeast town, that nobody would ever go to this town. It's a town that you drive through to get to somewhere else, and nobody in town ever knew. And it was in the middle of the 70s. And she told me the story, and I was just shocked. And I said, well, did you have dinner with them? And she said, I don't remember. And I said, well, did you talk to them? Did you hang out? And she said, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't really remember. And I said, well, did you go through her clothes? Did you go in the closet? I mean, it's like, how could you have this summer? She was nannying for the psychiatrist. And she said, I just took care of the kid. And I did, so she kind of had this experience that, I mean, she was an incredibly nice, kind person, but it was like, to me, it was like the lost opportunity. And I thought, wow, if that had been me, it would have been like that would have been like the summer to live for, die for, or anything. Like, I just couldn't believe that this summer sort of brushed by her. So that story was in my head. And then around the same time, I ghostwrite also. And so I was ghostwriting for a celebrity, for a big movie star. And we were spending time in New York and in Los Angeles at her house. And we were, doing all this stuff, and we were writing, and, and we were at her house in Los Angeles, and we got out all her diaries, and she's really smart and she's a great writer. And we were reading the diaries, and she'd kept a diary since, and her parents were celebrities, and she'd dated every celebrity you can think of. I mean, I can't watch a movie without thinking of the photos she showed me of these people, and it's like, she had this like unbelievable, amazing life and with all these people. And we were reading all these diaries, and she was really smart and she wrote really well. And I said, you should just edit these diaries and publish them. And so she fired me. It was just horrible, because suddenly I was out of a job, because she said, oh yeah, I should. And so, so I was suddenly out of a job, and I turned down teaching for a year to write her book. And I just, and I didn't have my own book. I didn't have a book in contract. And I was just in this panic, and I was really upset, because it's humiliating being fired. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible thing. Anybody who's been fired, you're just completely, emotionally, you lose all your confidence, and you feel humiliated. It was awful. And then I just thought, oh, I have to, I kind of had to escape that place that, sort of, not self-pity, but just sort of like embarrassment and self-loathing or whatever, and I just thought, and I didn't have any work. And I thought, well, I'm just going to write the book I want to write. I'm going to write the book that makes me happy. And so I was thinking of that story that woman told me, and I thought, and so in a way it was sort of entering a fantasy. Like if I had been a 14-year-old nanny in the 70s, and I had that opportunity, it was sort of like, it was just kind of like, I was just entering this different space that was making me happy. And I sat down and wrote the book. And
So you brushed on it a little, but why the 70s particularly?
well, the woman who told me the story, it had happened in the 70s, but I also think, I don't think it could happen today. I think with cell phones and Twitter and tracking and social media, I don't think you could hide huge celebrities. I mean, I'm sure they can hide out, obviously they can. You have to get off social media and stuff, but I don't know if somebody could hide somebody in their third floor house. Also, the 70s, it was like rules were sort of, people were figuring out the rules. It was sort of the clashing of the sort of 50s conservatism with like 60s rebellion, like everything was kind of clashing together. And, and so you had like music, you had Pat Boone and Glenn Campbell, and you had Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell, and you had the Commodores, and you had, Stevie Wonder. It's like music and disco. It's like everything was kind of coming together in this sort of frothing head in the 70s. And you had conservative values, and you had people taking off their bras, and you had liberal value, and everything was happening. And so I think it could only be the 70s where a psychiatrist could take somebody into their house for the summer to get them sober. I don't know if they could legally do that today. I mean, I guess you could, whatever, you could do that, but it was sort of like, it had to be, I just think for them to be hiding out and unknown, and for Mary Jane to be as innocent as she was. I mean, definitely a 14-year-old today, just from getting on the internet, knows more than Mary Jane knew at 14, or than I probably knew at 14. I mean, by 11, just with that, doing a report on the internet, they've figured out things that, that I probably didn't know till I was 17 or something. So it was like to have this, to have Mary Jane in this, sort of sheltered world, and have her curious and open to the world, but not have that much experience. It would have to come before the age of the internet and phones and photos. And so I think it just, the way the story goes, it had to be, it could have been before the 70s, but it had to be around the 70s.
I can't imagine that if there's a therapist and he would do what he did and bring someone in their house like you did. I mean, that wouldn't fly today at all, if you ask me.
Right.
So how did you immerse yourself in this time period? And was there anything that surprised you about this time period? And why did you pick Baltimore?
Baltimore, I mean, I went to graduate school at Baltimore, and I lived there for a long time, and I lived in Roland Park. So first of all, my first experience in Baltimore is through Ann Tyler's books, which, because these are all readers and you're librarians, of course, her books. And I loved her books so much. And a lot of them take place in Roland Park, in the same neighborhood as Mary Jane. And Ann Tyler's characters shop at Eddie's. And, and they go down those streets. And so, so Ann Tyler's books were like just so alive to me. And then when I went to graduate school, I went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and I was in Roland Park, and I was in Eddie's. And I mean, this is just an aside, but the first time I went into Eddie's, I was in Eddie's, and the woman in front of me gave her name for a credit. And I looked, and it was Ann Tyler shopping in Eddie's, because she lived right nearby. And I just thought, of course, I looked at her cart right away to see what she was buying. I thought, okay. I thought, oh my God, it's Ann Tyler. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing. And then I, as soon as she walked away, I thought, can I open an account? I just wanted to open an account at Eddie's because she had one. I just thought, if she has one, I have to have one too. So there's a way in which it's a bit of an ode to Ann Tyler. I mean, just like it's in the neighborhood of her books. And those are the books that really, I just devoured them so much, and it was like, before I was writing, I was just reading and reading and reading, and I just love them so much. There's a bit of an ode to her. Then I lived in that area, and as an outsider, somebody from California, and I'd lived in Canada for a few years. It was such an odd neighborhood to me. And it was, it was over 100 years old, and it was built by the Olmsteds. And it was like nothing had changed since it was built. I mean, nothing changed visually how it looked. And, it was just this really interesting neighborhood. And then, and then I had kids, and we bought a house in that neighborhood. And a lot of people would tell us, oh, they didn't let Jews here until 1975 or 76. And so people would tell us, you're the first Jewish, Jews weren't allowed in this neighborhood. And so people let that this was a neighborhood that exclusively had white people in it until the 70s, when things started to change. So the neighborhood to this day still has a sort of tension that was really interesting to me. So I thought, this beautiful neighborhood that has a history, a shameful history, and a certain tension. And, an ode to Ann Tyler. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but, it's like you could have somebody there in 1975 whose whole world would be the neighborhood, who wouldn't go to when Mary Jane goes to the record store. It's like she's traveling. It's like she's gotten on an airplane and gone somewhere else. But you could have people who would live in this neighborhood, never go to another neighborhood nearby, and never see people different than the people in their own neighborhood. So there's something about, Baltimore, the way it was set up and preserved. And sorry, there's something popping up on my screen that I have to make it go away. And so it seemed like a good place. The other reason that Baltimore is there's two great mental hospitals that have incredible psychiatrists. There's Johns Hopkins and there's Shepherd Pratt, where Zelda Fitzgerald used to go. And F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda used to come to Baltimore once a year. And Scott and Zelda lived on Charles Street, right across the street from Johns Hopkins. And Zelda would check into Shepherd Pratt. And there's been a lot of celebrities in Shepherd Pratt. So there are these two great mental hospitals. So you'd have a psychiatrist who was great enough that you would travel from New York to see him, or, that you would actually leave your house and move, because it had to be, even though his office is in the garage and he's 70s hip, it had to be somebody good enough to leave New York for. And so he's, he has to be associated with some great, so Baltimore just seemed right on so many levels.
So how did you decide to write about family group therapy? Like, what made you think like that?
Well, I mean,
that was big in the 70s, right? I mean, group therapy and
yeah.
It was that with Est was involved.
Yeah, Est, yeah, and in California, Esalen, people went to Esalen and Big Sur, and then rebirthing, which is still there and stuff. Well, I mean, so a lot of it is stolen from my life. So so I grew up in Southern California, and I grew up in a very sort of conservative suburban neighborhood, and we were actually the only Jewish people in our neighborhood, and our house was a mess. Everybody else's house was just spotless, just clean as anything. And everybody else's mother just looked wonderful with perfect hair and perfect clothes. And my mother didn't shave her armpits. I mean, it looked like she had guinea pigs hiding under her arms. And it was like, she never wore a bra. And, and it was just like in the house, and the refrigerator looked just like Mary Jane's refrigerator with all that terrible, unidentifiable food, just little baggies with black liquid. And you're thinking, what is that? And you don't want to open anything and smell it. Like you open it and you have to back away. Like you get in the light in our refrigerator was out my entire childhood. I remember like at some point, maybe, I got married really young, and I remember my first refrigerator thinking, you can have a light in your refrigerator. Like you could choose to have it, and you can open that door and there's light. Like, I mean, it was just sort of like, so my house was like that. And there were records and there were books everywhere, and there was dancing and it was chaos. And so and I just loved my friends' houses. Like I loved my best friend, Debbie Kilb's house, and I loved going into her house, and it was so clean and tidy. And I loved opening her refrigerator, and like, you could see everything on every shelf and everything was identifiable. And I loved eating their food. And, so when I was writing the book, the way I write is I don't really plan anything ahead of time. So all I had was this idea, just the idea, like there's going to be a movie star and a rock star on the third floor. And then I had Mary, and then I knew it was going to be Roland Park. And then I had her walking into the Cohn's house. And when Mrs. Cohn opened the door, I pretty much saw a version of my mother, and I saw my childhood house. And that was the moment that the decision was made that the Cohns were Jewish, and that's what their house looked like. And so that decision was made. And as soon as she walked into that house, which was really my childhood house, I knew that when she turned around and walked home, she'd be at my best friend, Debbie Kilb's house. Now, Debbie Kilb's parents were wonderful. They weren't anything like, I mean, they weren't like, Mary Jane's mother turns out okay. She turns out good, but they weren't like that. But her parents were wonderful, but her house was like that. And so when she walked in there, I thought, yeah, and she comes from Debbie's, so it's like things it's almost like, digging in the dirt, and things just open up, and they just open up. So I saw that house, and I saw my mother, a version of her, and it just kept going like that. So
that's funny. So are you Mary Jane?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because my daughters read it, and one said, Mom, this is like, it's not even a version of you, it's you. Like, this is you, Mom. But when I was 14, I was in Southern California. I was on the beach. I was, I had tar on the bottom of my feet. I had a boyfriend. He had a truck and a surfboard. I mean, it was like, I wasn't living that life, but internally it's me. I mean, I'm the person who will come to your house and start alphabetizing your books. Like, I can't, my clothes are organized by color. I just can't, like, I need order and cleanliness, and I need to see it, so it's a version of me. I love Broadway musicals. I love singing. I love group singing. And I love having kids. I have two daughters, which is great. But the group therapy you'd asked me about, and I went on a little digressive tour. So at my school, and nobody was like us, but then this one girl moved to town and she was there in 6th grade, and her family was slightly different, and she became my best friend. And their family went to family group therapy every Saturday morning. And so I would spend the night at her house most Friday nights. I love sleeping at her house. And so when I slept at her house on Friday nights, on Saturday morning, I would go to family group therapy with her family, which to me was just amazing because it was like these people you don't know, and you're sitting in a circle, and it was like all these parents. I feel like it would be like 20 people. It was so many people because it was spouses and then the kids, and the kids were kind of on the floor in front of the parents and crawling around. But it was like, people would be crying, and a husband and wife might be shouting at each other. And and it was, and there was like all these emotions flying, and everybody, and I would just sit there quietly observing, thinking, this is the most strange and amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. So, it was hilarious. But my family did go to group family therapy once. No, it wasn't group therapy. We went to family therapy once. And none of my friends went to therapy. My dad was always in therapy. My mom was in therapy. My sister, like the therapist's name was like, you would have thought it was somebody who lived with us because you heard it all the time. Dory, 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 Dory. So we did go to group family, but nobody liked it. And we all refused to go back.
That's so interesting. So, you talked about your friend Deborah. Was her dad, you liked her parents, but was her dad like Barry Jane's dad in the book? Because at points I thought maybe he was a little abusive. Or
yeah, no, he was. No, her dad wasn't. I steal everything from different places in life. So my daughters went to Roland Park Country School, the school that Mary Jane goes to, the girls' school, and and there were a lot of people who, they were all the most amazing families and wonderful people and warm love. All the parents were great. And we didn't believe a lot of the same things, but we had the common interest of the kids. And it was really this wonderful group of parents. And one of my daughter's best friends, her family had sort of like a ranch in the county, a compound with different houses on it. And her aunt lived there and her uncle lived there, and so, but they all came together for dinner at the grandmother's house. And when they came together for dinner, they said a prayer, and they would say, God bless the president of the United States. And they did that prayer that Mary Jane's family does. And I thought it was the most amazing thing. I just loved it. And so every time I would pick my daughter Ella up, late at night, if she had dinner, I'd say, did they say the prayer before dinner? And she'd say, yeah. I said, did they pray for the president? She said, yeah, they did. I'd say, tell me the prayer, because it just was so amazing to me. I just loved that detail. And they were the nicest people. And so, so I steal stuff everywhere I go and I throw it in. And of course, as soon as the book came out, I got a little text from that mother, and she said, did you get that prayer thing from us? I said, I did. I always, you got to admit right away. You can't, there's no hiding anything. I said, I did. I always loved it. And thank you. She just laughed. So it was, so you pull things from different places.
So you said you pulled things from different places. How did you start writing? Like, how did you know that you wanted to become a writer, and when did you start writing?
So I was that person who filled the diary beginning to end my whole life. So I was always writing my whole life, but I didn't think of it as writing, but I was always sitting around, what my dad used to say, like, he would notice me in a room and he's always like, Jessie's in the room for 5 hours. You don't even know she's here. I was the person just silently sitting in the corner watching everybody. Everything was interesting to me, in the world, and my parents and their friends, and just everything was always interesting to me. And I would just sort of record it. So it was like the world was a movie, and I was constantly writing down this movie I was watching. So I filled diary after diary after diary after diary. And, and I got married really young at 23. We were talking about this. And we moved to Canada for my husband's job. And when I got there, I wasn't allowed to go to school or work. Those were the conditions of my visa. And so I had no friends and I didn't know anyone. It was freezing cold. I'd come from California and I was in Toronto, which is a beautiful, amazing city, but it was cold. We got there and I didn't know anyone, and I had a computer, and I was just so lonely and sort of terrified. And I found that if I wrote first I would write my friends like these 16-page letters that nobody could respond. They'd be like, I'd get a postcard back. I love your letter. Send more. I think I get a postcard. And I just sent you 16, those yellow legal pads, just write these huge letters. So my poor friends were relieved, I think, when I started writing stories on a computer instead of writing them endless letters. And I just started writing, and I just was writing, and I found that if I wrote, I felt okay about myself, because I was doing nothing. I was cleaning the house, I was gardening, I was grocery shopping, and I felt invisible in a way, or I felt like, like, what am I contributing to the world? Like a lawn with no weeds, and just be out there. One of the neighbors showed me to weed with a fork. I'd be out there with a fork weeding my lawn. But I found that no matter what happened in the day, if I wrote just for a couple hours, like I felt okay. The rest of the day was okay. So I just started writing. I was always a reader, and I was reading like mad. I just started writing and writing and writing. And then I just started writing short stories, and I was reading novels and short stories, and I was writing. And then I would read literary magazines. I sent a short story out. I thought, I wonder if anybody would ever publish this. And I just sent it to one magazine, and they took it. And I just was shocked because the writing was secret. Like, I didn't tell anybody I was writing, and it was like, my husband knew, but I just thought, oh, they took my story. And I thought, well, maybe I can write. Like, it was just like, I had no sense of whether it was good or not. I was just doing it. Essentially what I was doing was teaching myself how to write a story by just writing and writing and writing. So when they took that short story, I thought, well, maybe I can do this. And then I applied to grad school, and then I went. And then, and then it was like, okay, so somebody else thinks I can do this. It's kind of sad that you need somebody else outside of you, but it was just where my brain was.
Oh, interesting. So you named the book Mary Jane. So Mary Jane in the 70s, I guess, was the term for marijuana, right?
Yeah. I don't know if it still is. Well, I think it is because, you have I don't know if you know what a tweet deck is, but on a tweet deck, you can put hashtags of things. So I just put it on there to see if anybody's tweeting about the book. And so I have hashtag Mary Jane, and all I get is marijuana stuff. I just get like videos of people smoking weed or growing weed or anything, and they're all kind of funny. And then we'll get something about the book every night. But I love the name. I always loved the name. If I had another kid, I would name her Mary Jane. I just think it's such a cute name. I love the name Mary. I love Jane. I love them together. So it does, it was marijuana in the 70s. I mean, I knew like, as I said, I don't really know what's going to happen until I'm writing. I knew early on as I'm writing her, I thought, you know what, she's not going to smoke Mary Jane, and I thought it's not, they're going to smoke it, and it'll be there, and she'll be shocked. But I thought, she's not going to do it. She's not going to try. This isn't going to be the summer where Mary Jane starts smoking Mary Jane. I thought that's not going to happen. And the other thing I knew is Jimmy, as I was getting to know Jimmy when I was writing him, I thought, you know what, he's going to be a good guy to the bone. I mean, he makes mistakes. He really messes up in a lot of ways. He's addicted. Nobody chooses to be addicted. I mean, nobody wakes up and thinks, oh, that'd be really fun to be addicted. I mean, it's a curse. I thought he's going to be a good guy to the bone, and he is not going to make a pass at her, and neither is Dr. Cohn. I thought none of the stuff that, I don't know if you would expect it, but sort of it's sort of set up for that in fiction, maybe, for those kind of things to happen. And we're going to have she's going to be in a house with two good men. I mean, they're flawed. They make a lot of mistakes, but they're two good people.
Yeah, it's funny. Okay. It's funny you said that, because I felt like there was a little tension in the book that I was sort of waiting for someone to do something to her that wasn't so nice, but it never happened. But sorry, go ahead.
I didn't want to go there. I mean, it was like, I think it was kind of my head and what I was feeling and where I was. And I just thought, I don't want to go there. I want this to be about, this sort of, I mean, I wouldn't have even thought in terms of what I want this to be. It was almost like when I saw it unfolding, it was just in terms of huge change and huge development and her world opening up and exploding, and seeing that things aren't, what happens in your house isn't what happens in every house, and what happens in your neighborhood isn't what happens in every neighborhood. And I also wasn't passing judgment on either of them. I mean, her father, I did pass judgment on him, But on either of them, it's like there are good things and bad things about both families in both ways, you know, and I didn't want her to reject everything. I thought she's going to love the church to the very end and love singing in that choir. I thought, you know, these are things that bring her joy, and there's no reason for her to reject them just because the Cones don't go to church. Like, I didn't want her to fully take on their life or fully reject her own. I wanted her to sort of figure out who she was as she toggled between these two homes, which were really, you know, in the Venn diagram, they barely overlap, and she was, you know, figuring out who she is by jumping back and forth.
Right. I think that made the book so special that you did it, that your writing style was like that.
Oh, thank
So,
you.
so Jimmy and his wife, can you talk about them a little more? How did you come up with them, and are they based on anybody in particular? Or?
Well, Jimmy, when I was writing the book, I deliberately read Keith Richards' memoir. Did you read that one? It was great.
Oh.
I mean, it's ghostwritten by somebody, but it's ghostwritten by some great writer. And I read it, and it really got into his head. He was a heroin addict. I mean, there's a line in that memoir where he said, I just wanted to make enough money to buy a guitar pick and new strings. And I just thought there was this mental state. So I really got into Keith Richards' head. So it's not Keith Richards. I mean, he's English. It can't be Keith Richards. But I wanted to be like a great Southern American guy, but I kind of took Keith Richards' internal life and struggles with heroin and not wanting or seeking fame, just really wanting to play guitar. And I just sort of put that internal life in Jimmy and created this guy. And for Sheba, I mean, I was thinking about all those 70 stars, you know, Captain and Tennille and Cher and Donnie Marie and the Carpenters. And, you know, and you had these 70 stars, and it's like they had this persona of like what you would see on television, but then there's like these sort of horrors going on behind, you know, I mean, look at poor Karen Carpenter died of anorexia, I guess. And, you know, so I just sort of wanted it to be this person who had gone through that, who just wanted to be authentic. I mean, she is, you know, she's a star, and you know, for ghostwriting, you know, you spend enough time with people like that and movie stuff, you know, it's like she's somebody who definitely has the most power in the room. Like whenever she's in the room, she has the most power. She has the say. She's the one everybody looks at, and she is walking around with that power and that sort of celebrity thing where you can be self-centered because everybody gives you that. Everybody allows you to be the decider and the director and the, you know, and allows your opinion to be the loudest. But I wanted her to be, you know, really a good-hearted person who's trying to be authentic and who's sort of, I mean, she's not really rebelling it, but she's authentic with Mary Jane and the Cones, and, you know, and she loves her glamour, but she's not hanging on to, she's just being who she is, which still is somebody with a lot of power.
So it wasn't after any one band in particular. It was a compilation of.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with writing is because, I mean, like I'll base people on people, like Mrs. Cohn is based on my mother, but because you can't truly really know the absolute internal life of some other person. I mean, you can really just only try to know yourself. And even that's a hard one, you know, it's like, you can barely know your own self. So because it's like that, it's like, I'll start with the idea of a person, but then I'll create my own person, because if I create them, I can know everything in their head. You know, I can know what they dream about. I can know what they think. I can know how they'd speak and how they'd act. And I mean, so even my own mother, I can't know her the way I can know a character I created. So I looked at her, she wasn't wearing a bra. It was the idea of my mother, but then I just took off and she was somebody else. And the same thing with Sheba. She was the idea of, you know, Cher or any other 70s star, but because I was creating her, you know, I just took off and made her somebody that, you know, it's like acting. Like I'm in their head and I feel them and I am them when I'm writing. I'm like in this sort of dream zone, you know.
You know, it's interesting because I think she was changed by the Cohn family, but I think the Cohn family was also changed by Mary Jane.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, we're all, yeah. I mean, I think there are people like that for all of us that, I mean, everybody changes this, but there are people that you encounter at a certain point in your life where the things turn, and those people are important. But I do think a lot of the time when somebody's changing you, you're changing them as well. You know, I mean, if it's powerful enough that you've changed, then usually, I mean, sometimes it's a teacher or something and they're changing everybody around. Often it's a teacher. So yeah, no, I did want, you know, it was like this sort of collision, you know, they were taking her in and she was entering this world.
So did you have that before you just, as you start writing, you decide to change courses, or you knew you were going to do this from the beginning, that you're going to have a plot like that?
No, all I knew is that these celebrities would be on the third floor.
And
So,
that's
so when I sat down to write, I knew it was going to be Roland Park. At first it was 1976. I thought, then I have to deal with the bicentennial. So it was Roland Park, and it was 1975. I knew her name was Mary Jane because I love that name. And then it was just the door open and I saw my mother, and then I knew what the house looked like. So it's sort of like, it just, it's like Dr. O said, when writing is like driving at night, you just have to see what's in your headlights. And so it's sort of, I just write forward like that. And so everything was decided as I got there. And so what I do though, is when I finish writing for the day, I write in all caps, a note to myself, what I think is going to happen next. But then by the time I come back to it the next day, I often have scrapped that plan because something's gone on in my head when I was walking or sleeping or whatever, or sometimes I'll start towards that, but then something else will catch my eye and I end up going there. So I'll derail myself. I mean, it's like, I don't know if you've ever been to Rome, but a lot of people have traveled to Rome. So I remember the first time I was in Rome, I was trying to read a map and get places. And after a while I thought, this isn't possible. You try and read a map and get somewhere. I mean, it's like spaghetti on a plate. It's like trying to follow a strand of spaghetti and get to the Trevi Fountain. It's like you spend a whole day trying to get there and you don't get there. But I very quickly realized if you just relax, what happens is when you're trying to get there, you end up in so many other amazing places. That's like, who cares if you don't get to the Trevi Fountain? You get to the Spanish Steps, and you get to the Campo di Fiori or something. So writing is sort of the same. Like I might sit down and think, okay, get to the Trevi Fountain, but when I'm on my way there, I see the Spanish Steps, and it's like, yeah, this is better. So it's like so there's a flexibility and openness. So I know there are people who, brilliant people who write brilliant books who plot them out, and this happens and this happens and this happens, this happens. I don't think I could work that way, because I think it works best for me when I allow the story to happen on its own.
So how did you capture the voices of a 5-year-old and a 14-year-old? I mean, your kids are grown, so you don't really have a 5 and a 14-year-old anymore.
Yeah, but I was both of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to remember. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and the 5-year-old, I mean, she's actually a mix of my 2 daughters and my niece. My one daughter used to compound words. She's, paper towel was always towel paper and buckle seat. And she was always getting words wrong, like I think Izzy does sometimes. So no, I mean, it was just like, and the other daughter was just always hanging out with the grownups, wanted to be with the grownups. And, so it was just, I mean, again, it's like you can, if you base it on a person, you're stuck with your limited knowledge. So it was sort of like, I'm starting with these people I love, my daughters and my niece, and then I just give into what's come out of it, and like that, she is who she is. But I remember being 5, and I certainly remember being 5, and 14 seems like yesterday. I mean, all of it seems like yesterday.
I interpreted it as like Izzy was like the child that Mary Jane wanted to be, that's when I was reading it.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. I mean, I love, when I was a kid, I loved dolls. And all I wanted to be when I grew up was a mother. It's like, all I wanted. And I had dolls and I carried dolls around. And when we traveled, I traveled with dolls. I mean, I remember being 5 and traveling with my doll Peaches. And, and I fed them, and, and I didn't have when I was a little kid, I didn't have any friends. My only friend was the 72-year-old woman who lived across the street, and I'd take my doll over and we'd have tea. I just wanted to be a mother. And I used to love babysitting and all that stuff. So Mary Jane sort of loving on Izzy and just loving that interaction really is just how I've always felt, about motherhood. And, I just always thought, I mean, what could be more fun than singing a song with somebody in the bath and teaching them a song that, you've heard a million times and suddenly knew, row, row, row your boat and around. I mean, it doesn't happen in the book, but the first time you teach a kid around, it's like magic. They're like, wait, this works. I mean, it's like,
what's better than being a mother?
What?
Being a grandmother, because then you don't have the responsibility of
yeah. It was just the joy. I mean, I was lucky. I mean, I know there are people who want to be a mother and then they do it and they're thinking, oh man, somebody else needs to take this over. And that's, I know that we're not all programmed to enjoy it. Yeah. I mean, my own mother used to say, oh God, I hated it. you know, and she's, I mean, she cracks me up. She's great. We have a great relationship, but she's like and she would say the worst thing was having to read to you. And I thought, you didn't, Mom. She's like, I know, because I hated it. Like my dad read to us every night. We'd get in bed with my dad, and every single night he'd read us books. And I just loved it. I mean, so I was lucky in that I was fortunate enough to be able to do it. And it was like, for me, there's nothing better than lying in bed with somebody reading a book.
I agree. I agree. So you talked about fame in the book. You know, Mary Jane gets a taste of singing, so she has a talent. So my question is, how is it that a person discovers their talent? And you have a talent for writing. So what was it like to discover your talent? Because I think you're so talented the way you wrote.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. I mean, I think in a way, discovering one's talent is sort of kind of having the courage to do the thing that you're enjoying. You know, it's like people who have talent who are really, you know, you'll say, oh my God, you're so good at that, you know, drawing or whatever. And they say, nah, it's easy for me. Well, it's easy for you. I mean, it's not never that easy, but I'm just saying it's almost about just being okay with doing the thing you love, you know, and it's hard to do the thing you love, especially if it's something in the arts. You know, it's hard to reject the thing that would get you health insurance and a regular paycheck and all these things that make you feel safe and okay in the world to do this thing. And, you know, and we can't, so it is, I mean, I feel like finding one's talent is, I mean, it's kind of an act of faith and courage. And it's also luck if you have the circumstances in which you can do it. You know, I mean, you think not everybody, there's certainly whatever millions of people who have a talent that because of the circumstance of their life wouldn't have the time to do it because of a work situation or a marriage or taking care of somebody or taking care of an elderly parent or, you know, so I think it's a combination of going for it and making the time for it. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't do and didn't do so that I could write because people, oh, I want to write and I don't have the time. And so there are certain things that I do choose not to do so that I do have the time to write. There's a lot of things I choose not to do.
How many hours do you spend a day writing? Like how?
You know, like maybe 3. I mean, it's high intensity focus. I mean, I'll be thinking about it or I'll do it or I'll, you know, and I always did it with kids around. So I'll do it, you know, if I have 20 minutes, I'll open a computer and fiddle around. I used to take the computer with me when I picked the kids up from school and I'd get there early and just sit in the car and write. If I get a pedicure, I take the computer and I write while I'm getting a pedicure. You know, I mean, it's like, you kind of just, you have to choose to just do it.
So which character was the most fun for you to write about? Was it Mary Jane or is there anybody else in the book that?
They were all fun. I mean, I liked I mean, I find celebrity interesting and fun and I liked Sheba and Jimmy. I think like my favorite scenes would be when Sheba and Jimmy were alone with Mary Jane, like in the car driving her home. And so, like those, to me, that felt really, there's something, I liked those. I liked being in that headspace. I mean, all, you know, they were all, you mean everybody had complications, but it was all, I mean, the writing for me is kind of a relief. I go into sort of a dream state and it's a nice relief for me. When I can get, it's terrible when I can't get in that headspace. If I'm just sitting there trying to force it out and my brain's not working and I start playing Wordle or Quirtle or Secdordle, the 16 one. Have you tried that one?
No, but
the one that has 16. I have to do it on my iPad so I can see, you know, so I do actually, that is what I do when I can't write. I do like a word game. I walk, I try and just sort of clear my head and come back.
So I think this book would make a great movie. Were there any options for a movie or?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people were trying to get it. And it went to Sony because it was like this amazing producer named Elizabeth Gabler, who's the head of a division at Sony. And it went to her. And then I was hired to write the screenplay and it's done and they have it and they're looking for director. So knock on wood.
So is it going to be a TV series or a movie?
Movie.
Oh, great. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. So that was fun. That was fun working with them and thinking about it. And because it was, you know, like you have to change it for a movie, you know, so I was having meetings and they're like, you know, the ending, like in the end, they're sitting around and listening to a radio. And she said, for a movie to watch people listen to something doesn't have the same effect. Like you don't feel this big moment. Like, so you really have to change, so I had to change the end, so there are little things that you have to think about, visually. And I don't want to give anything away to anyone who hasn't, or the people who haven't read the book because I don't want
I
to
would say the majority of people read the book.
So can I give a
Yeah,
spoiler?
go ahead. Yeah.
But like the thing about Mary Jane, worried that she's a sex addict. It's like, how do you convey, like, I didn't want to have a voiceover. How do you convey that in a film? How do you convey that visually when she's not telling anyone? It's a secret, it's in her head, and so, but by the time she says it in group therapy, you want the viewer, just like for the reader, when I wrote it, by the time she said it in group therapy, I wanted the reader to be able to flash back and be like, oh yeah, I can see how, you want it to be believable. So you want to see it sort of that it can't, you don't want to see it coming, but you want to be able to see it in hindsight. And so that was a hard one to figure out for the movie. It's like, how do I convey that? So it was new problems, but ooh. Sorry. I don't know how to turn this off. Sorry, it's gonna go away. Oh, sorry. It's gonna go
Jessica,
away.
are you allowed to say who's going to be Mary Jane in the movie?
They have to bring you back. I can't see you anymore. Do you see me?
Yes.
Okay, well, if you see me, that's fine. I can't see you anymore. They are looking, sorry, it's a little disconcerting because I can't see you, but that's okay. They are looking for directors, and they have sent the script to a casting agent. So,
Is there anybody you would like to see as Mary Jane?
well, Mary Jane, because she'd be 14, would have to be some unknown person who, I don't know how we, I don't know how we would,
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely, there are people I see for Jimmy and Sheba and everybody else. I'm going to try and bring this back to my screen because it's too, sorry. I don't know how to do it. Okay. So yeah, so I don't know.
Look on the bottom of your screen. Sometimes there's a little icon down there.
A little
If you
icon.
get back to the Zoom event.
Like I see, oh, maybe I have glasses. Like I just can't see anything. It's just, so I'm looking at a blank. Sorry. Okay, now I see you, but you're so tiny. I'm gonna just enlarge you. You're like 2 inches, but at least I can see you. Okay. And I can't see anyone else, but that's fine.
So I read that you wrote this book during the pandemic. What was that writing a book in a pandemic like?
I wrote some of it in the pandemic, a lot of it in the pandemic. I wrote with a friend and we would write on Zoom. I wrote with 2 different friends and we would write on Zoom. I wrote with one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And with one, we were very strict. So we'd get on, not on Zoom, we'd get on FaceTime together. So we'd get on FaceTime and she was working on her book and I was working on my book, and we'd set the timer for 25 minutes. And then we'd write for 25 minutes without talking. And then we might talk, make a cup of tea, hang out. And then the other friend, we would just write, and it was a guy, and we'd write and we'd talk and we'd hang out and we'd write. So you kind of write and hang out. So it wasn't so lonely. Because before that, I used to write in cafes with other writers, and we'd sit in a cafe across from each other and we'd see each other and talk and so it was the same thing. It was like I find that my brain does go in 25-minute increments. So it's like you have really intense focus and then you look up. So when there's other people there, you kind of look up and you wait and, and then you can talk for a minute and you're not just stuck in your head all day. It's not so isolating.
Right. That's good.
Yeah, it was definitely good. So that was how I wrote in the pandemic. And I still, with my friend, we still get on FaceTime and write together. Even though we kind of could see each other now, but it's still hard with COVID and masks and all that stuff. So we do. Yeah.
I know. I think it's a wave of the future a little with Zoom.
Well, I could go back to cafes too. Like I walk by cafes and I see people working. So I'm thinking, I can do that, but I have to find a friend who will also go to a cafe because I like to look up and talk. I'm okay being alone, but I need to make contact. Like I can't spend the whole day in my head. I need to interact.
So did you design the cover of the book? It was so pretty.
No, so I have no idea where the camera is, but I have
this one.
You have that one, and this is the paperback. So no, HarperCollins has a whole art design team, and those people design the book covers, and they always send it, and they send it to you, and then you could say what you like, what you don't like. when they sent that, I liked it immediately. Like normally it's like you go back and forth and you think about when they sent the one that you have with the record on the cover, I loved it immediately. I thought, I mean, I didn't like that she was holding a cigarette because Mary Jane would never smoke.
Mhm.
And, nobody really smokes. I mean, I said that, I was like, I don't really like this cigarette. And they said, it's okay to, but they convinced me that it was fine.
I guess in the 70s, more people smoked than they do now, but.
Right. And then it's like, I think of that as Mary Jane, but I guess it could be somebody else in the house
Right.
smoking Mary Jane. But, and then, but I do love that cover. And then for this cover, I don't know if you can see it on camera because I have no idea where the camera is. They just wanted to change it, make it kind of summer beachy and see what happened for the summer and appeal in a different way. I mean, the thing about that first cover that I like is I get a lot of fan letters from men. And I think it has to do with that cover that they would pick it up. So, I do get a lot, and like a lot of older men, like 50, 60, 70, who are around in the 70s. I got one from like some record industry guy sent me this really nice letter. I mean, so I get really nice letters, which is nice. I mean, it's nice to get letters from anyone or everyone. It's anybody who takes time to write. I'm thinking, I love you. Thank you. But just, I think part of the reason is that cover that they would pick it up. And I'm not sure, hopefully they would pick up this cover still, but I'm not quite sure.
I think that's nice too. I didn't see that. I just saw the hardcover. So are you working on another book?
I'm working on another book. It's a little bit overdue to HarperCollins, but I had to stop to write the screenplay, which I was forgiven for, because I'm usually never late with anything. Well, no, I'm late with a lot of things, but not with books.
Yeah.
And so I had to pause and write that screenplay. And so I'm working on the new book, and hopefully it'll be okay.
What is the new book?
It's called What Miss Lena Prays For. And it takes place in 1985 in San Francisco in a very elegant department store called I Magnin. So it's about and I'm 2/3 of the way through, so I have no idea how it ends. I can't tell you. But it was about a girl working in this really fancy, elegant department store who didn't grow up with anything like that and just sort of entering this world and figuring out her life. And it's 1985 in San Francisco, so there's a lot of interesting things happening in the world.
So I'm sort of done with my questions. Can I go to the chat and maybe people want to ask questions? But
Sure,
you just see what people
I wish
wrote
I could
in.
get this screen back. Would I be able to see people?
Yeah. Hello from, we read that from Alberta, Canada. I love these presentations. Thank you for doing this. Claudia wrote, hello from San Jose, California. Glad to join you guys.
Aw.
Let's see. Why did MJ's mother turn around after Jimmy's song as opposed to when she went to the Cohen's house and heard all the wonderful things they said about her?
What's that question again?
Why did MJ's mother turn around after Jimmy's song as opposed to when she went to the Cohen's house and heard all the wonderful things they said about her?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's a good. Things blowing off the table. That's a good question. I guess it's funny because, to answer those questions is to act as if I knew ahead of time anything that happens or that I'm writing. So there's a sort of falseness in answering it. So I can only answer it in sort of analyzing it the same way, which just seems wrong. But I think she definitely had to go through a process, and she also had to figure out, she also had to resist her husband. Resist his force. And so I think it would definitely take a while. And my feeling about her was there's no way she could do anything in front of her husband. Like there's no way in that house when he was sitting there that she could, defy him. That wasn't going to happen. So it would have to be something sort of happening on the side secretly. And the ending, somebody from Florida had said she loved the ending, which was so nice to hear. The original ending was when they picked her up at church and just drove away, and I had it end there. And then my editor, Kate Nitzel, was like, no, like kidnapping and charges and the police, like they can't just drive away with her. You can't end the book there. You have to, and so I just kept trying and trying and trying. And Kate kept saying, I think we have to feel, Kate's a great editor. She comes up with feelings. Like she doesn't come up with ideas as much as feelings, like how we have to feel at the end. And she kept saying, I think we have to feel okay about Mary Jane and her mom at the end. Like we have to feel like something has changed for them, you know, like that they went through something together and they come back together in the end, we'd feel okay. And so I kept like, how do, you know, so when somebody gives you a feeling, it's like, how do you have story to match a feeling? And I just kept trying and trying. And then the ending that's there is what I finally landed on after really, truly, probably 25 endings.
Wow. So having 25 different endings, is there anything else in the book that was edited that maybe you wanted in, or other things that were edited that you know, that they made you change a lot of times? That's a lot.
No, I mean, the editor, Kate Nitzel, who I work with, I love her. She's a genius. She's amazing. There's never a make you change. It's always your book. I can do whatever I want. So I always have the final say. But she's so smart. And it's like, you know, if she thinks I mean, what usually happens is I write too much and she'll be like, do we need this scene? It's more just eliminating. And I'll think, do we, you know, like usually it'll take me a day. I'll think, you don't like that scene. And then like a day later, I'll think, she's right. We don't need that scene. So it's usually just kind of paring down and not changing what's already there. And so it's, you know, but the ending was like adding something. It's like putting a tail on this thing. It's like, we have the whole animal, but we didn't have the tail. And I just kept writing it, the ending, and she'd say, nah, it doesn't work. And I'd write another ending. Nah, I don't feel anything there. And I write another, and she said, nah, I don't feel right. I don't feel happy, you know? So it was just like, but I mean, it takes a lot of trust. I mean, we've worked on 5 books together, and I trust her. I trust her instinct. I trust her. I mean, she's incredibly smart and talented. And it's like, you know, it's rare for me to be like, no, Kate, you're wrong. We got to, you know, I mean, there was something in there. Oh yeah, there is something in there that Kate was like, this is a little too much. And I thought, nah, I kind of like it. It sort of cracked me up, and you know, so I'll leave it. And then when I was doing the movie, they said, this is too much. We got to take it out. And so I thought, well, that was interesting. So by the time I got to them, I was like, okay, fine. So
Do what you want.
yeah.
So Ellen Clark wrote, I think your writing process is amazing. I agree. Very different from many other authors, but it shows very creative, how creative you are. I love Mary Jane.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. That's so nice.
So does anyone else have any other questions that they want to ask? You can unmute yourself if you do.
I had a question. You mentioned that your mother's house reminded you of where Mary Jane was babysitting. Did your mother let you cook because she didn't want to cook?
She, well, interestingly, when we were little, when I was like 7 and my sister was 10 and my brother was 2, my mother came in and she said to us, I quit. And she used to smoke cigarettes, and she was smoking a cigarette, and she lit a cigarette, and my sister and I were playing Parcheesi, and she said, I quit. And I said, you quit? Well, you're smoking, you quit. And she said, no, I quit being a housewife. I said, you quit? And she said, yeah. And I said, you can do that? And she said, yeah, I just did. So we said, so what does that mean? And so then she took my sister and I around the house, and she showed us the washer and the dryer and the dishwasher. And she showed us alarm clocks that she bought and put in our room so we could get ourselves up, and showed us how to, you know, and we had bikes and we can get ourselves. And she just quit. But the one thing she wanted to do was cook dinner because she liked to cook. So nothing was done, which is why the house was a mess. The refrigerator was a mess, and, you know, and our clothes and my room, you know, it was just like chaos. I mean, there was like love, music, fun, but it was like we were just on our own, and it was just chaos. But we sat down to dinner every single evening, and she cooked. So that was the one thing that she did do.
Thank you.
And that was the only responsibility, actually, was to show up for dinner and sit down and have dinner.
I did enjoy the book. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't
Yes.
see anyone. So
Okay.
if I look like
Hi,
I'm facing out, but I can hear you.
Yeah, I really loved the book, and I got my whole book club to read it.
Aw.
And but my question is about the Cones. When their marriage deteriorates, you get the feeling that it's because Mrs. Cone just feels like a doctor's wife, you know, that hasn't really come into her own as an individual. But what about them as parents? You know, because I think it's kind of implied that they're not the greatest parents, you know, that as much correct me if I'm wrong, but my takeaway was that as much as maybe Mary Jane's family, was too uptight, that maybe they were a little too much the other way. Is that what we're supposed to think? That they were like exposing their child a little bit too much to Jimmy and all that lifestyle,
Right.
or is that true?
Well, I mean, thank you for that question. And thank you for doing it for your book club. That's so nice. I mean, they're supposed to think, like, I don't write with any intention of anyone thinking anything. So it's more like, and I don't judge my characters. I did judge Mary Jane's dad, I have to admit that. And I don't judge my characters. It's more like I'm seeing a movie and people are who they are and they act the way they act. I wouldn't parent like the Coens, and I didn't. I mean, I would, like, I really, truly didn't, and I didn't want that. My childhood was like that, and it was, it's like we had tons of love and we survived. Like, my brother and sister and I reacted to it differently. My sister probably had the most difficult time with it, and because my sister and I took care of my brother, he probably had the easiest time with it. So, so you kind of get to, when you get to my age, it's like, it is what it is. And you just, everybody does the best they can at the time with who they are. So it's more that I'm just seeing what happened. There's a sort of detachment and distance while seeing it really clearly and detailed. So there was no like, oh, the Coens are bad parents, I'm going to have them do this and do that. It's more like, here are the Coens and this is what they're doing. And some people will walk away from that and say they're horrible parents, those are the worst parents I've ever seen. And some people will say, oh, that looks like a fun childhood. But my intention isn't to inform anyone of how to feel. I'm not trying to tell anyone how to feel about that at all.
Yeah.
It's just, that's what happened. And that's what Mary Jane saw. And Mary Jane, I think it's pretty clear that she wouldn't parent the same way. I mean, she's doing things differently, but I also don't think she's judging them. I think she's just taking it in and seeing what's happening and doing what she can.
But, it was interesting to me what you said early in the broadcast about how you decided early on that Mary Jane wasn't going to do drugs, and you decided that, Jimmy wasn't going to make a pass at her. But, it might be interesting for you to know that from a reader's perspective, I was very worried about all those things. And there was a tension in the book, as there was a sweetness in the book, and there was also a tension that you didn't know if these things were going to happen. And maybe that's why, even though my childhood was kind of like the Coens family, very, very liberal childhood, very, very liberal people. But I was getting worried that because I was worried for Mary Jane, I was thinking, this things are getting out of hand.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's good. I mean, tension, in a way, tension is plot. I mean, if you think, what is a plot in a book? It's just, I mean, you have to have tension in writing. And I mean, I think anytime you take a 14-year-old and you throw her in with a rock star, there's going to be that tension of worrying about what might happen. So I mean, I think it's good that you felt the tension.
Yeah.
I mean, I think definitely I didn't know it for maybe the first third. And then I decided, it's like, as I was getting to know Jimmy, it was like, it was a decision that came to me, and Dr. Cohn. It was like, this is not going to happen. And I think it was, I mean, I think it really was that I didn't want to go there, and I didn't want the book to be about that. It's like, if I enter that space, it's like, if that happens, if Jimmy molests her or Dr. Cohn does, or something sexual happens between them, then that's what that book is about. Like, it has to be about that once that happens. You can't have that happen and then just go to the next chapter and they go to the beach. And it was like, that wasn't, didn't want to write that book.
Right.
I mean, it was almost like I didn't want to see that movie in my head. I mean, really, truly, the way it comes out, like, my brain is way smarter than I am. Like, if I went on Jeopardy, I would just fail. It takes me 5 minutes to think of the answer. I could think of it later. But it's like, somehow in the writing, there's some space in my brain that just lets the movie happen, and I can just see it unfold. But it's like, I'm not consciously thinking ahead and plotting and planning. And I'm not thinking, oh, I'll have this tension of thinking that something sexual is going to happen and then it won't happen. It's more, it just unfolded that way.
So a
Thanks.
few more questions. Les Popkin asks, when you finish one book, how quickly do you start another one? Does it feel like a pressure to come up with another good idea?
I usually start the next day. I mean, I can start, or I'll take a couple days off and like watch TV or something, you know, because there's so much great TV, you know, or I'll read something. I mean, I don't usually read anything similar to what I'm writing. But I do start right away, and I have more ideas. I mean, I hope I live a long, long time, because I have more ideas than I have time to write. You know, I mean, everybody, it's like some people, you know, I was talking to somebody who said, oh, you're lucky you had such a bizarro, strange childhood, because it gives you so much material to work with. I thought, you know what, I've never talked to a person who, if you talk to them long enough and go deep enough, everybody's childhood is like at least 15 novels. Like, it doesn't matter what your childhood was, there are many novels in there. Like, once you start wormholing in, it's like, so it's, you're either willing to look at it and explore it and write about it, or you push it away, and either one is fine. But so it's more that I'm just willing to be like, yeah, that was my refrigerator, and I'm going to throw it in a book.
It's probably so true. So Jane Greenberg said those three shared so much, gave each other wonderful insight, and grew from each other, that she loved them.
Oh, that's
And
so
then she
nice.
wrote, meaning Jimmy, right, we knew that, Jimmy, Sheba, and Mary Jane. And Karen Robbins wrote, what do you think Mary Jane's life would be in 2020? And what influence do you think that summer ultimately had on her?
I mean, that's a good question. I do think she definitely would be a mother. And I mean, I would hope that she would pursue singing, you know, that she would definitely choose it as a career. I mean, in one of the endings that I wrote, or maybe even two of them, I jumped time, and I had her singing backup for Jimmy's band. And in one, I had her putting out a record, you know, so I was definitely thinking along those lines, that she knows that singing is the way she has to go, and she would do it. But of course she would pursue motherhood.
So Alan Forrest wrote again, another question. MJ's father is such a bad guy. Golf and country clubs seem so important to him. And his anti-Semitism was devastating when he said that even Black people are better to hire than Jews. Wow, I hope you've never experienced this personally.
Oh, no, of course I have. I mean, not of course I have, but thank you for hoping. No, I mean, the thing is, my last name isn't particularly Jewish, it's Blau. And for whatever reason, what's that?
That's a Jewish name.
Well, it's Catalan, it means blue, or it's German, it means blue, but there, you know, people don't identify it as Jewish. And so I've had my whole life, I have people say anti-Semitic things to me, like so often, because they don't realize I'm a Jew. When I lived in Oakland with when I got married at 23 with that husband, we lived in this building in Oakland, and I used to color my hair red, so I was red. And there was a woman who lived in that building, and her name was Jessie. And she liked to call me every day, and she'd say, hi, Jessie, this is Jessie. And then she would start telling me about all the redheaded Jews she ever met in her life, because she hated the redheaded Jews. And she started every conversation with, the redheaded Jews are the worst Jews. And she would tell me, because the man who owned the building, she hated him, and he had red hair, and he was Jewish. And she would tell me about everything she ever bought, you know, a mattress she bought from a redheaded Jew that had springs, and a car she bought and never worked. And she just would sit around and I never told her I was Jewish. So I always felt like I was undercover, and I would just think, wow, you know. And then I did work at this very fancy department store in San Francisco right outside of college, and people would say things. I mean, I didn't encounter it as somebody saying, oh, you're Jewish, go away. I encountered it as people saying anti-Semitic things and not realizing they were talking to a Jew. Somebody just did it the other day, actually, in my building. Somebody said something about the Jews. Didn't realize I was Jewish. So you hear stuff a lot. You know, you do hear stuff a lot. And then as the only Jewish kid in my neighborhood, you know, I mean, everything we did, like my friends would be like, oh, so do Jewish people all have messy houses? And I'd be like, I don't know, we're the only Jewish people around. Like, you know, they'd be like, oh, so do Jewish moms don't shave their armpits? I'd be like, no, that's just my mom. I'm sure like all the Jewish people in New York shave their, you know, I mean, it was just like everything was, you know, oh, so Jewish people, you know, it's like you know, it was there's this terrible burden to have to be representative of all Jews, because especially because we were such a bizarro family. But no, I think, I mean, stuff like that happens. It happens a lot for everybody in every category. And the thing about being Jewish is people don't realize it often. So it happens to your face.
Right. I think there's some areas that are probably worse than other areas, but yeah. So Joan said, do you think you'll ever bring any of these characters back in a later book?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's so many people have asked that, which is so, I mean, it's like every time someone says that, I think, oh my God, I love you. I love you that you love it so much. You want to see more. Like, that just is the nicest thing. But I don't know. I don't know where I would enter it, or I don't really know. I mean, I loved working with those characters because I did love them all, like Jimmy and Sheba and Mary Jane in particular, and Izzy. And so for me, it really was an escape. It was like, I liked hanging out with them.
I have one more question here. What does your sister do? Did her childhood impact her career path?
My sister, first of all, my brother and sister are all super clean, and we all don't like anything on any flat surface. So if you go into any of our houses, there's not stuff everywhere. So my sister she works for Museum of Natural History in Santa Barbara. She's the head of development.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she's always been very compassionate and taking care. And my brother works in television production.
And last question is, do you also write nonfiction?
Every now and then when I'm asked, but I don't enjoy it because I don't like having to that's the thing about fiction. You can make anything up, and it's like, you don't have to fact check it. It's like, I mean, I did fact check stuff from 1975 in Baltimore. I would get on the internet, or I'd call people who lived there, and I would try and get the actual Baltimore year facts correct. So I did do that, but it's like, I'm not a researcher. So I do when I'm asked, and then I ghostwrite for people, and it's memoir. So that's, but it's their voice, their world.
Well, thanks so much, Jessica. This was wonderful. I loved your book, and this was a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Enjoyed it.
I'm sorry for all my beeping. I couldn't figure out how to shut down this computer.
It's okay that you were so interesting. It overrode that.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I don't even know how to click off because it's just, you're a postage stamp in the middle of my computer. I don't even know where to go. But,
I'll leave the meeting and I'll end it for everybody. So it'll end.
okay. All right. And thank you everybody for reading it. I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you
so
everybody for coming, and join us next month. Jessica, you should come too. It's a nonfiction book.
much. Okay. I'll come.
We don't do very many of them.
I'll come. That sounds great. Thank you.
All right, thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.
Love the book. Thank you.
Thank you. I still don't even know how to close this.
I'll-
It's just, you're posted. Maybe I just close my computer.
Yeah, close your computer and I'll end the meeting.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone. I really appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.